Right, guys, we're going to take a look at arrays today, one-dimensional arrays, how we can actually declare them, and how we can search in an array. Now, the first thing that we need to remember is that when it comes down to arrays, they can only store one data type, and we need to know how big the array has to be before we declare it. So let's imagine that I want to create an array that will store my student names, and let's imagine that I have 3 students. Well, in order to do that, we need to type in declare, followed by the array name. So I'm going to call it student names, okay, followed by a semicolon, and then we're going to say that this is an array. Okay, and we need to type in the range. Now the range, since I have 3 students, is from 1 until 3. Okay, and since I'm going to be typing in names, it is of string data type. Okay, so essentially what that's done is it's created something like this little table. Now, as you can see, there's nothing inside. Let's say that I wanted to fill this array in. The easiest way to do it, and whenever you have anything that's to do with a single one-dimension arrays, is to linear search, which essentially means go from the first box to the second box and then to the third box. Now, the easiest way to perform a linear search is to use a for loop. Now, a for loop, okay, would go from I1 to 3. Okay, so this for loop is going to repeat 3 times. And now all I need to do is throw in an output statement. So my output statement would be something along the lines of enter a student name. Okay, and for an input, I'm going to say input, okay, followed by my array name. So it's student names, followed by which position I want to put it in. If I type in I, the first time that this array will work, it will position the name that I type in into the first box. So let's say that this is the first time I'm running this program and I see this message on my screen and I type in the name Gogos. Okay, Gogos will be positioned in the first box because when I say input student names, it's referring to this whole array, but I'm saying at the position I at the current state of this for loop is 1. Okay, the next time it's going to run, if I type in Bambos, Bambos will be in position 2 since I has now been incremented. Now, this whole process until the for loop finishes is called linear search. If you come across a question that's to do with arrays, you are likely going to have to either input data into an array one by one or search an array one by one. Okay? Awesome. Now, let's imagine that instead of having this array, we have an array full of numbers. Let's say that our array is called student grades. Okay? And it is of integer data type. Okay, and let's imagine that this array has been populated like so. Okay, and let's imagine that we want to calculate the average of this array. Now, a computer cannot do what we humans can do and say that, okay, the average is 100 plus 95 plus 90 divided by 3. It has to do it step by step. In order to do this, we need a totaling statement. A totaling statement will be used in order to calculate the sum for our average. Okay, so let's get rid of everything and see how we would get down to it. So if I want to find the average of this array, I need to know that my average formula should look something like this. Average should be equal to sum divided by 3. Now, the first thing that we need to do in order to find the average is to find the sum. Okay, so we need a variable, so we'll call it declare sum as integer. Okay, and before we start using the sum, we need to make sure that when we begin, the sum is equal to 0. Okay, Now, this is very important if you are performing totaling or counting in your programs. If you want to get that extra point, make sure you initialize the value. Okay, so now we need to one by one add the values in our array to the sum. So in order to do this, we need a for loop like we had before. And now we need to one by one add the current box's value to the sum. In order to do this, we need to type in sum is equal to sum plus whatever our array is called. So our array is called student grades. Whoops. And we need to mention at position I because this will be changing every time the loop is running. Okay. And we'll close the loop here. Okay. And now, once this loop is finished, it means that 100 has been added to the previous total of 0. Then 95 has been added to 100, and so forth and so forth. Now, all that's left to do is to calculate the average, but and display it. So we can say output, the average is, comma, and we can do sum divided by 3. Now, I strongly recommend, instead of doing this, you create a variable to store this calculation. So the best situation would be to declare a variable called average, okay, as integer again, or actually we'll call it real because it might be a decimal, okay? And once we're done with finding the sum, we can say average is now sum divided by 3. So now we could reuse this average, and instead of writing the calculation here in our output statement, we can just type in average now. Perfect. Now, let's take another look at something that they might ask you to do. Now, they might ask you to look for the lowest number in an array. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to get rid of everything that we've written here, okay? And I'm going to consider that this array exists, and we need to check if we found the lowest value. The easiest way to do it is to use a for loop. But before we get to that, we need to set up a new variable, a variable called low, or lowest. And this will be an integer, okay? And before we begin, lowest will contain the largest possible value, in this situation, 100, okay? Now, if we were looking for the highest, it would be the exact opposite. We'd be assigning the smallest possible value. Okay, now, the least efficient way to do it is to create a for loop that will cycle through all of the numbers, okay? And it will perform a check against the lowest variable. So in order to perform a check, we need to use an if statement. So in this case, if the lowest is less than whatever's in my array currently, so in the student grades array at position I, so we're checking against the first box the first time the for loop is running, okay? Then if this is true, then we need to update the lowest current value. So if, let's say, the first box contained the number 76, it means that lowest now has to be 76. But we're not going to write 76, we're going to write whatever is in this box here. Now, in this situation, 100 won't even pass this test here. Okay, just a second, bear with me. So I'm going to say student grade at position I, okay? We're going to close this if, and we're going to ask for the next I. So if I was to run this program, it would go something along the lines of this. So let's just draw a little text box here. This one's called lowest, okay? And we'll add another value here called I, and I want you to follow me as I go. So the lowest when the program starts is 100. Okay, and the moment I hit this for loop, the I value is now equal to 1. Okay, so now it's going to check if lowest, which is 100 right now, is smaller than whatever is in the student grades array at position I. Position I right now is 1, so it's comparing against 100. Lowest isn't smaller than 100, so this statement is false, and all of this will be ignored. Okay, so then it will come to line that says the line that says next I, and I will now become 2. Okay, so now it's going to compare if the lowest, which is 100, is smaller than whatever's in the student grades array at position I, which is 2. So in this case, it's comparing 100 if it's smaller than 95. Okay, lowest isn't smaller than student grades at position 2. So now lowest will become whatever our array has in position 2. So this means that lowest will now become 95. So 100's out the way. So let's put a strike through that. And now it's 95. Okay? Once this is done, it will go to next to I, and I will become 3. Now it's going to compare if lowest, which is 95, is smaller than whatever is in our student grades array at position I, which is 90. Since this is true, okay, it will go to the lowest variable in the if statement, and it will assign the new value, which is 90. So this 95 will get deleted, okay, and it will be replaced by 90, okay. So in this situation, essentially, we've gone through every single box until we've come across the smallest value. Okay,